I hope you are well nourished for the next talk. We have two special guests from ThoughtWorks today who are talking about developer experience, and they told me that the talk from Lizzie already had some connection points. Yeah, I couldn't listen to it because I was on this stage, obviously. So I'm very excited to hear all of the good points about improving developer experience from you. So give a welcome applause for Lara and Beatrice.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello and welcome. I'm Lara, this is Beatrice, and we're both product people from ThoughtWorks. For those who don't know ThoughtWorks, it's a consulting agency for software development in general, including things like engineering practices and design. And both of us have been in engagements about the topic of developer experience before, and we want to share our experiences and learnings with you today about how to go about this and how to do DX discovery, basically. But before we get started, we thought it might be fair if not only us talk about ourselves, but you also get the chance to introduce yourself to us. And I would like to ask you to either join menti.com with your phone and enter the code at the top, or use the QR code in the corner to log in, and tell us what the size of your company is. Oh, nice. That was very quick. So far, a nice distribution. Okay. Can still see a couple of people holding their phone up. And so far, this looks like we have a very nice representation of pretty much everything, which is good to know. There is something more that we would like to know, which is this question. So we wanted to basically learn what the distribution between developers and non-developers is in this room. So do you actively work on code? We also consider QAs part of this role, or infra people, or if there are a couple of people like us who are more focusing on the product side of things.
Okay, so here we see a clear distribution to a lot of you working on code. Very nice.
That was expected, actually. So
we figured.
Okay, thanks for sharing, everybody. So, yeah, let's get started.
Let's get started. And we start, of course, with the why. Why are we even talking about developer experience? And we brought a quote to start with, taking more the business perspective. In a lot of organizations, software developers only spend 30 to 40% of their time actually developing features. And under feature development, we consider all the work that's in the end actually value adding. So 60 to 70% of the time is spent on admin work, delays, documentation, and things that I'm guessing most of you are not so excited about. And let's think about the saving potential here. We had a couple of answers with engineering organizations over 100 people. Let's assume we have an organization with 200 engineers in it, and we managed to save 2 hours per week for every developer that they can additionally invest on actual feature development. If we add that together, that's a saving potential of about 2.8 million, which is equivalent to hiring another 10 developers in the company. So here we have a huge savings potential if we just manage to let developers do the work that they actually have fun with, and that's actually creating value. Let's take a look at a couple of other things. So cost of engineering is skyrocketing. That's the point of making sure that the time of developers is spent on value-adding activities. But also, let's take a look at talent acquisition and retention. We are in the tech industry where talent is scarce. So we have more demand for developers than supply, and that means that every developer has lots of opportunities. When they're dissatisfied, they go, they leave. And here we also have some numbers. When we need to rehire another developer after one left, it costs about 100 to 150% of an annual salary of a developer to fill that role again. So it makes sense to make sure that developers are satisfied and happy in the company so that they stay. And the third point is clearly like competitiveness and time to value. The more smooth an engineering organization works, the faster you can react to industry trends, the faster you can build new products, react to the market. Huge source of competitiveness. And we've seen this not only now, but already for the last years, where a lot of industry leaders have started investing in this. So Google acquired Dora. Microsoft built a developer velocity lab in which they created the space framework. And all of these things are initiatives designed specifically to increase developer productivity. So a lot of people think about this. Let's also think about this here. And we shift now from a more business-focused perspective to the actual perspective of the people working on code, so most of you. Finding ways to improve productivity is about finding ways to introduce more joy and decrease frustration in a developer's day. It's a very sensitive, subjective piece here. It's about how does the developer experience their daily work. And here we have two key elements that drive the satisfaction of a developer during the day. The flow state, I'm sure all of you have made the experience where you're very immersed in your work, in the activity you're doing, and you can just focus and work and try things out and so on. The more time a developer is able to spend in this flow state, the more productive they feel. So feeling 50% more productive, which is a huge increase. So if a product person like me comes over and says, hey, I have this tiny little question. The question takes maybe 1 minute, but statistically, in order for a developer to get back to the previous flow state, it takes 20 minutes to get back. So these interruptions in a developer's day are very, very costly. It's not just the 1 minute where I ask a question, it's the 21 minutes for the developer to get back to their previous state of working. Very critical component, and we'll take a look at this later as well. And cognitive ease. So we are all working in companies, different sizes, and we have an ecosystem of tools and platforms and things that we need to do our work. And the cognitive ease is basically the simplicity and intuitiveness of how you can navigate through that ecosystem. So the better that is, the more smoothly it's running, the easier it is to get things done, try things out. I have this product idea, I'll quickly build it, I have a server up, it's running smoothly. Developers that have that surrounding and ecosystem feel 50% more innovative. So now we've looked at the business components, saving money, retention, all of these things. And we also looked at the soft factors, what makes developers feel good, feel productive, feel innovative. So lots of reasons why developer experience is important. So how do we then come from the position of, as a company, realizing, okay, we see opportunities to improve our developer experience, but we don't quite know where to start. We are working in the company, but we still don't quite know what our developers actually need and what their pains are. And that is closely connected with how you spend your days. Like, how much time can you invest on value-adding activities, feature development, and how much time are you spending on other time-consuming tasks and blockers and bottlenecks and so on. So we have this starting point where there's lots of uncertainty where and how to start with developer experience, because it's a big field. It can be the tools and platforms in the organization, it can be the culture, it can be the leadership, it can be all sorts of factors that influence how productive a developer can be in your organization. So we get to the point that we're talking about today, the developer experience discovery. And what we're basically doing here is we gain knowledge. We create insights about our developers and how they're doing in order to then shape how we move forward. We use these insights to strategize, to make sure that whatever we build gets our organization to the next level, gets it running more smoothly. Based on these insights that we gather, we can then define our goals, our vision, and make product decisions of the things that will add value to our organization. Also, we build empathy. As in any product development, if it's for end customers or internal developers, knowing who our customer is, how they feel, what they need, is essential. And when we start our product development, it's also really important to keep our eye on the ball, really making sure that we solve these issues that developers have, and not just something that we assume might be there. And all of this points into one thing: we are lowering the risk of wasting efforts. Maybe a quick show of hands. Who has worked on a product before that in the end was not used? Yeah, me too. I have also done that. It's incredibly frustrating. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of effort. So the more we spend here on gaining knowledge and creating insights, the lower the risk is here of wasting effort, and we gain confidence in whatever investment decision we make. So our talk will be about how to get from here, our starting point, to this point where we are sure that we're doing the right things through the developer experience discovery. Now, when we take a look at an organization, there are multiple levels we can look at. We can take a look at the entire organization, and here we create a holistic view of the developer experience. We find what are the focus areas, what are the points that are creating most friction, and get this holistic overview. Later on, we'll have to then drill deeper into the specific issues, but it's a good starting point to have a good view of the entire organization. What we can also look at is specific domains and cohorts. So if we, for example, have an organization with 20% of developers working on Java, 30 on SAP, different programming languages, we can narrow down the scope and focus our research on a specific cohort. Another very interesting way of researching is we are good with coding, for example, but maybe monitoring and testing is an issue. So we can also scope our research to make to like specific life cycle phases. Generally, the more focused our research is, the easier it's going to be, and the more concrete the insights will be. That's why I said when we start on the organizational level, it's likely we find these focus areas, but we'll have to drill in deeper later on. And the lowest level is we look at platforms and tools, and that goes a lot into product experience, where we take a look at how developers interact with a certain platform, a certain tool, what's blocking them, what components they consider valuable, and so on, so that we can develop the platform further. Okay, but before we now start into actually doing the research, let's consider a couple of elements that are very critical. So when we do discovery work, we are trying to generate insights to reduce the uncertainty that we have, right? And in order to create these insights, we'll talk with developers, we'll observe them on the job, we'll use up their time. So these two elements are critical. We need to be able to actually act on whatever insights we gather. So, and that has two elements. The first one is we have influence and control. Especially when we move towards like larger corporates, responsibility will get fragmented. So we have someone responsible for testing, someone for security, whole different departments, talk to each other maybe a little bit. So if we do research in security and we have no influence and control there, it's going to be very difficult. So at the start, we think about my area of responsibility, what can I actually achieve there, and we adjust our research scope accordingly. And then the second critical element here, with the little heart, is we make sure that we're actually able to act on the insights. So when we start a research initiative, we take time of developers in their day, so they expect us to create positive change. So we need to make sure at the start that we'll be able to act on it with resources, with capacity, and so on. Okay, so we have now talked about the big why, lots of reasons why investing in developer experience is relevant. And now we have like two scoping elements where we can then see what do we actually want to assess. Once we have done this, we move into the next phase of actually conducting the research.
Yeah, that's my part. But again, before I continue, I wanted to ask you a third and last question on Mentee, which is, who of you has participated in something like user research activities before? So has anybody participated in an interview or has done some surveys to identify what user needs are? Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so we have a couple of people who participated and others haven't. This is nice. Good job on the
We have a perfect 50-50 split.
Yeah. Considering the amount of developers we have, that's a great result, actually. I'm very happy about this. Okay, so for those who haven't participated in research before, all of this can sound quite complicated, and you maybe are now very... Oh, is there a problem with my microphone? Okay. So maybe all of this sounds like a lot of effort to you, and the way we're talking about it can be a little bit confusing. Maybe you don't know why you should be doing research at this point, or you feel like this is nothing to do with your role, or you don't know where to start and what to ask for. And we also talk about a lot of different methods today, which can be confusing. But the message I would like to give you, and if you only take this away from the talk now, I would already be a happy person, because just getting into this habit of talking to people, that's what we would like to encourage. And establishing this relationship with the people you're doing this for, and with the people you're supposed to improve things for. And that can also start with just having a coffee with someone, or getting into this habit of reaching out to people on a regular basis. and talking to your fellow developers and seeing how they are doing and where things are that you can improve for them. And quickly you'll just learn what to look out for, basically, and the topics that are very common across different groups of people. And when it comes to solutioning, it also doesn't have to be super complicated, because small things can sometimes have a huge impact on people's life, like just providing a code example or providing how to set up things, and an explanation and guidance on that can already have a big impact. So I hope it doesn't sound very scary to you now, because that's actually the only thing we want to say, is start talking to people and find out where you can improve things for them. Coming back to this point of why should we even do research if we know all of this and we are part of the group of people we're optimizing for. That's a pattern that we've seen at many companies. They sometimes, even large companies, they put a lot of effort in reaching out to their customers and talking to users that way, the outward-facing products, and they hire designers to do that, and they actually have the knowledge in the company, but when it comes to designing products or developing products for developers as users, there's complete silence often, and there's nothing being done to investigate what they actually need. And part of that is because people who provide or who develop these things feel so close to their colleagues, and they actually think that this is the false consensus effect that's written down here. We all tend to think that our own behavior is much more common than it actually is in reality. And I think everybody who paired with somebody before, even if the person is working on the exact same task, maybe even has the same educational background, and they're generally being considered basically belonging to the exact same group, you can still be surprised how they set up their environment, how they use tools, for example. And I think that can already tell us how much we actually know about what other people need. So what we suggest you doing is to combine a data acquisition approach. On the left side, you can see qualitative methods like the interviews or visiting people in their teams and observing what they're doing and asking them questions while you observe them using different things and working in their own environment, but also usability tests fall into that category. And this is all being done to understand the wider context of people and understand reasons for their behavior, and just really in-depth gaining an understanding of why they're doing the things they do. And that can beautifully be combined with a more quantitative approach on the right side, where you try basically to put numbers behind it and to find out how common these patterns are across different teams or across different people, basically. And that can be done via web or platform analytics or A/B testing. But the most common one, I think, is surveys and rating tools, just to quantify and validate the things that you learn from the more qualitative methods. We put down a couple of learnings that I wanted to highlight from having conducted a lot of interviews. As I said, it doesn't have to be huge and complicated. After 5 or 8 interviews, you often are in a position where you have heard most topics or themes at least one time. And as I said, if you combine that with the quantitative methods that are often less time-consuming, that's a beautiful way to go about it. And if you don't have access to people like me or researchers or designers or UX people in general, try to enable the people who have never done this before, because at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. There are a couple of things to consider, like not creating confirmation biases or social biases, or not asking closed questions in an interview. But the list of this is not endless, and it's quite easy to actually have that in mind when you start practicing. And the rest of it is basically just experience and exchanging feedback with each other and observing each other. And so that's one way to go about it. Is you don't have to hire people specifically, but you can also enable the people who are there, basically. Another good idea is to have a browsable space where you can store insights, because nothing is more annoying than randomly reminding a fact about your users after 3 years and then having to go back to a conversation with a manager and trying to find your report there. I often see people using Confluence. That's also not ideal. but just thinking about how can I make this available to a large group of people, what I learned, and write it down in a structured way that it allows me to go back to and to search for topics, for example. That's also a very valuable thing to do because it makes your insights just more accessible to yourself and to everybody. Coming back to the researching roles, there's a tendency that we create silos and we let the product people do all of this alone, and then they go back to their teams and report and tell you, okay, here's what our users needs. But the more reliable insights can actually be gained from combining something like a business perspective, a people perspective, and a tech perspective. So all of the developers under you should actually get involved and ask for being involved in these things, because that's where the most value lies and where you get actually the most reliable insights, because people in the interviews ask and also listen to different things and they pick up on different topics, and it's very valuable to have a developer or a tech person in those interviews present, and to make the decisions together as a team is the most valuable thing that you can do. Now maybe it sounds scary again because it can look like we're expecting you to do this on top of the other things that you're already doing. But if you don't have the time to participate in research activities as a developer, it should actually be your team effort to reprioritize things in a way that allow you to have the time. And it's actually a good idea to dedicate your activities always and make them connected, everything you do, to what provides most values to your users or the value chain. And basically, that's directly paying into that. And so, yeah, again, if you don't have the time currently, then maybe it's the job of your team to reprioritize things accordingly. Here's a list of known dimensions that influence developer experience. I'm sure that many of you will recognize some things. So we have the deep work aspect that Beatrice already mentioned. So do I have enough time to get into that beautiful flow state, or am I sitting in meetings all day or being interrupted by messages again and again? Are we testing efficiently? Is our work efficient? Do we have something like a clear direction? So can I see where the value is that I'm providing? So this is a great starting point if you don't know what to look out for and you're just starting. This comes from a paper where researchers talked to people from 21 different industries. So this is quite a holistic view of things that are just known to affect the developer experience. And this is a great place to start and to start looking and investigating in the different areas where you might suspect something going wrong. Yeah, this is an example of, let's say, you conducted the first couple of interviews and you learned the first couple of things. And typically, when we follow up with a survey, we include 3 different types of questions in that survey. The first one would be validating questions about the themes we heard in the interviews. So this is an example from a company where we heard that for some teams it's indeed hard to know what the value is they provide in the bigger picture and how they play into the company goals. And the question we phrased then was, it is clear to me how my team's work plays into the company goals, and we let them rate on a scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And then this can tell you basically across a larger number of people how common this pattern actually is, and across teams. We typically combine this with the different DX dimensions that I just showed. And we also provide a scale from horrible to great and let every person rate for each of the factors how well they think their own teams are doing in this specific aspect. And another thing that we typically do is to combine this with metrics that show the business impact over time, or more business-focused metrics that show over time how activities you do in order to tackle problems that you learned about, how well they improve over time, and how they affect the efficiency and productivity of teams. So for example, we would put in the DORA metrics, and that show you recovery times and so on, to just see how the things you're doing I can, oh, so, yeah, okay. How they improve over time, basically, that's what that is for. Here you can see an example of the horrible to great rating that I talked about. And you can again see the different DX factors at the top, and each of those lines belongs to a DX factor. This company overall was doing actually great with their developer experience because a lot of those lines bulk in the good section. But then there are also a couple of ones that act as outliers. And as you can imagine, measuring this didn't take a lot of time, analyzing this didn't take a lot of time, but it beautifully shows the areas of improvement on first glance where you can investigate further or where you can invest in activities to tackle those problems. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the interview frequency. So what we talk about mainly today is this initial discovery part, where we typically do an intense phase in the beginning, 2 weeks of intense interviewing, basically, where we try to conduct about 2 interviews per day. And that can sound like very little, because imagine you only being busy for 2 hours per day and then you're done. But it's actually not that simple, because the rest of the time, as you can see, it goes into the synthesis process. And discussing as a team is actually where the quality of your research comes from, and the quality of the insights that you have, and how it affects, and discussing how it affects your decisions and what to prioritize, basically. So that's another recommendation, to take enough time for the synthesis part. Doing this once very intensely in the beginning does not replace talking to people in the long run. So it's all about this forming of the habit of talking to people. So this could be a continuous discovery process where you maybe have 1 or 2 interviews per week. And then you can use those insights in the long run to inform your immediate decisions, for example, and what you're trying to do in the next sprint, and figure out what the learnings are related to those topics, and it will be less intense, a less intense process. If you don't have the time to do the 2 weeks part in the beginning, that can also be an approach to just gather the same insights over time. But as I said, what I would like you to take away is to frequently talk to people, and it can also help to have a fixed day of the week that is maybe then interview day, or even a fixed time slot where you invite different people at the same time, always just to keep this habit up.
Okay. Now that we've done a good amount of research, we know we gathered insights, we know about pains, we know about needs. How do we then move into actual implementation? How to get then into value creation? So the discovery phase is really about finding out where to invest to create most value. So we are thinking about building the right thing. Now during the execution, we are rather focusing on building things right, so that the effort we do take actually yield the desired impact. So the problem we identified before, we are then building a solution, and we need to make sure that this solution actually solves the previous problem. So once we've conducted our discovery, done research, clustered, prioritized, we know what problems to solve. Then we move into finding solutions. Usually, it makes a lot of sense to bring in a cross-functional team. Any expertise that we need, we just bring it together in one room, ideate ideas, find solutions, and then we think about, in order, if we implement that specific idea, what's our hypothesis? How does this idea solve the previously identified problem? We write these hypotheses, and then later on, when we move into implementation, we derive the smallest potential product we can do, or solution we can build, to test if this hypothesis is proven right. So essentially what we're doing here is we, instead of finding a problem, building a large solution, launching it after 2 years. We are iterating in very small circles. And the reason, again, is we're watching out for the amount of money we spend. Because it can happen that we are at this point, we built a product and we just realize it doesn't solve that problem. It's fine, it's a rather small investment, we can try something else. So when we move into implementation, we take small steps. We move iteratively, and we always check back if whatever we're building is actually solving the problem. We create a roadmap, we do change management, we execute. Now, let's take just a small moment to think about how do we measure the success then. And here we can take different lenses. We have the first lens, which is the effect on the developer. Here we have things like satisfaction ratings. How satisfied are you with your development workbench, for example? We also can check here how well platforms and products are adopted and used. Usage often very clearly shows the effect something has on a developer. The developer toil ratio is a cool thing. I just want to mention it. It basically means how much time does a developer spend on tedious and repetitive tasks, which is a cool metric. You would assume like little, but the company that founded this says actually that if you have less than 50% spent on repetitive and tedious tasks, that's already quite a good result. So it's interesting to measure. Maybe it's worth a shot in your organization. The second lens is the effect on the business. And here, most of the indicators are lagging. So we have the DORA metrics showing kind of the velocity you have as an organization. We have the space metrics, time to market, and so on. Usually when you have investments in your developer experience, the effect on the business will show later, after a couple of months. And the third lens is the success of your initiatives. So we've said before, we want to make sure that whatever we build tests if we actually solve a specific problem with that. So what we're doing here is we look at adoption rates, we look at changing behavior, and so on to see if whatever we produce, whatever we developed, is actually solving the problem. Now, to summarize, we've had a bit of a journey now. We started our talk talking about framing. So we are in an organization, we narrow down the scope. What is it that we actually want to look at? We looked at the different flight levels, we looked at making sure that we have influence and control, and making sure that we are able to act. Then we had a big section about how to actually conduct the research. How do we gather these insights that we need? We talked about how to then synthesize these insights, how to derive themes, and identify kind of these problems and pains to work on further. We talked about turning these insights into actionable activities and initiatives. It can be strategy workshops, it can be visioning workshops, it can be product inception workshops. Depending on your flight level, this needs to be adjusted. And then as an outcome, you have things that you do, things that you try, you build, you develop, you measure, you see if it works. If it doesn't, you change it. If it works, you continue. We are back to our typical build, measure, learn circle. And here, very important, as Lara already mentioned, it's a continuous discovery. So talking to our users, talking to our developers, that keeps on happening. So that we keep our eye on the ball, again, on the most pressing needs and pain points that our developers actually have. All right, let's discuss. So, how do you feel about the topic of developer experience now? If you think about your own company, do you feel like it would be interesting to invest there? It would make sense to invest there? And big question, would you feel ready to next Monday go into work and say, hey, let's start? Thank you.
Thank you for your insights. So I have a couple of questions for you. As you might have insights to dozens of different organizations, did you encounter differences in the satisfaction levels among programming language ecosystems like PHP versus Golang or others?
Good question. So I think we would actually consider this more to be part of something like a tech assessment. And usually we focus a little bit more on the soft factors. So it's not really like I don't have an example of where we compare different environments from different programming languages with each other. No.
Okay. So any surprising stories or results you have come across in your research?
So what I'm typically surprised about is when it comes to the topic of autonomy of teams. So in companies where there's a high level of autonomy, sometimes what we find is that there's something like we have to find a balance between keeping people happy, because they usually, with this high level of autonomy, create an environment where they are very happy and they just get to experiment a lot. And that sometimes, from the business perspective, can mean that all the managers tell us that we have so much redundancy and everybody's doing something different. How can we solve that problem? And that's an interesting dynamic that I've seen several times now. And that's an interesting topic to balance, basically, and to find solutions for the different points of view.
That sounds familiar, actually. I can see some of those points in our company.
Yeah.
From what size do you think such research makes sense?
And I mean, for this, it's a very good question. And what we try to say with the talk is, regardless of the size of the company, it makes sense to start with just one interview to get out there and talk. So we have done a lot of these assessments for large corporates, which has a lot of complexity built into the company size. In smaller companies, a lot of the complexity comes from the different lenses of developer experience. So there is complexity built in, for sure, but there are many ways to just get started, and if it's a big overview of the organization you look for, or just investigating a small piece, just getting out there and getting started is our main message. Yeah.
So we have two questions left. Who does this typically, in your experience, leads or HR? I guess we think about the research.
Who does it lead?
Who does this typically? So I don't know what this means in this context, but I think we mean research. So who does the research typically lead in your experience? Lead HR?
I've never seen actually HR leading any research, to be honest, because typically it would be product teams who actually want to figure out what their users need. So that's the most typical example of research activities in general. Sometimes the marketing department is involved in it. But as I've shown on the slides, actually I think it should be the teams who are providing solutions to anybody, basically, and to get their different roles involved in those types of activities.
So have you performed this type of research in open source projects?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But it's actually a good thought to take away, we should offer this actually to other people too. Yeah.
Thank you. And we might have some presents, but I think, there you are, Tobias. You are prepared. So thank you for your talk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.